doesn't matter whether you are a corporate that is competing with another corporate. Everybody reaches a new level of efficiency when participating.
The idea is actually that people start collaborating on a blockchain.
So, hello everyone. My name is Artiona Bogo. I am also part of the blockchain of the Blockchain team, representing the blockchain ecosystem here in Berlin. The Blockchain team, most of you know, but for those of you that do not know, our mission is really to connect all the stakeholders and promote Berlin as the global blockchain hub. And there's a bunch of impressive projects happening here around the area. And today, this event is dedicated to mobility, and it's the third in an event series in the context of the Berlin Blockchain Week. I'll be your host for today, but really the men of today's show are actually going to be introduced by Sebastian right after. So this is like the journey for this session. I would kindly ask you to pose any questions you might have on the Q&A section. I guess you've done a bunch of Zoom meetings in the Corona times, so I think you're all very familiar with that. And yeah, we are live on YouTube. If I'm not mistaken, Sandeep, correct me on that. We had a few technical issues at the very beginning, but should be fine by now. And this session is recorded and will be shared right after today's panel. And yeah, we have 4 interesting talks today by 4 different players, significant players of the blockchain ecosystem, especially the mobility sector. Sebastian from Riddle and Code will also be the moderator of today's show. We have Peter Busch from Bosch going through the use case that they actually have been working on regarding Internet of Things. Then Matthias from Deutsche Bahn, Systel will take over. Lastly, Bruce from Ocean Protocol. I think you're all very familiar with these names we have here today. To end with panel discussion, please come up with all the candid questions. Don't be shy. We know you are not, and ask the tough questions, especially given the context of the conference today, blockchain in news, right? So that's what we want to hear about. And without any further ado, I'll hand over to Sebastian that will introduce himself and also the other panelists for today. Back to you, Sebastian.
Unmuting myself. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to have you all, and we hope that we will help you to understand where the adoption of blockchain technology in the mobility sector is. And I'm also looking forward to have 3 colleagues that, most of you might know. We know each other, I think, for a couple of years. So Peter, hi to Bosch. Peter is in charge of the mobility DLT practice, I want to say, as part of the wider blockchain initiatives at Bosch. Matthias has been with Deutsche Bahn Systel for also 5 years now, I think, and he's head of blockchain user experience right now. So I'm looking forward to the explanation of that one. Bruce, of course, is a veteran setting up BigchainDB, one of the first major platforms in the DLT space in Berlin, and he moved on together with his team to set up the Ocean Protocol 2 years ago, a bit over 2 years ago. So we're looking forward to hear from him where the data economy in the mobility segment is heading. So all of them will present later, and we'll have a bit over half an hour of panel discussion. And of course, we welcome all your questions. But let me now start by giving a short intro presentation summarizing where we are with blockchain in the mobility sector. A couple of seconds to share screen. So I hope this works for everybody. So of course, the mobility sector is challenged right now, not only due to Corona. We are all aware of some of the problems that, for example, the automotive sector has for quite some time. And since the world post-Corona or during Corona is not the same than it has been before, we all have to understand, is blockchain technology part of the solution for the issues, both the innovation issues and the problem fields in the mobility sector, or where is innovation maybe postponed and what can we expect from the roadmap. So that's why it's quite interesting, I think, today to hear from different big players in the sector where we are. Riddle and Code is, despite the rivalry between Prussia and the Habsburg Empire, a Vienna-based company, but we also are quite active, I think, in the Berlin blockchain scene. Me personally, I'm stuck in the middle. I'm based in Munich, running the commercial activities of Riddle and Code. And you can look up that slide if you're interested in our company or the homepage. For us, we are a player that is trying to gap the bridge between the physical and the digital world. So if we talk mobility, of course, we are aware of all the physical objects that come into play: vehicles, cars, trains, infrastructure, traffic control systems. So if we talk about blockchain in that area, we think that three essential building blocks have to come into play. First is identity, both for passengers or drivers, typical KYC procedures, where we all know that blockchain is playing a big role, but also digital identities for objects. And I will talk a bit how this is achieved. Then addressability is a big thing that has to be enabled technically. And then since blockchain, of course, is basically technology from the financial space, transactional capability is enabled and can, of course, help future mobility systems to become quite efficient. So what's the big difference? We all know that there are a lot of projects out there in the blockchain space, or a lot of projects using blockchain technology, but most of them are limited to the software side of blockchain. So blockchain as a data registry, where we all are aware of, the capabilities such as immutability, the potential to comply with data privacy rules. But this kind of reduction to the software part of the equation might not be enough. Because what do we have? We can aggregate data inside blockchains, but we are not really sure where do the data sets come from. So there's not necessarily an automated trust in the data sources. And that's something that has to be overcome, especially if we think about autonomous vehicles, and to make all the different mobility systems interoperable. So for various reasons and from various business perspectives, just think, for example, of the insurance industry, but also traffic control system, we need trusted data aggregation. That means we have to equip vehicles and equipment with crypto chips or comparably secure solutions. Only then we will be able to have end-to-end trusted data delivery and something like audit trails and notary-proof data records. What can we now do to turn objects or vehicles into trusted data sources? We have basically two options looking at the physical environment of a mobility solution. We can tag an object itself. That means crypto chips for electrical objects that have compute power like vehicles, or tagging solutions for example, car parts along the supply chain. If the parts themselves are too small or maybe not valuable enough or difficult to track because of their size, then of course we can track transport containers in order to allow freight management or supervision, and also, trade insurance processes, for example. So as a result, from at least Riddle & Code's perspective, we can use object ID technologies, machine ID solutions, and vehicle ID solutions to turn the physical world in a also tamper-proof part of blockchain equations. And this will help us to solve some critical challenges that we see in this industrial IoT world, because of course mobility is, if you want, a subsegment of the IoT area. So we can create secure vehicle or machine identities using, for example, crypto hardware chips. We need a highly secure key management that is also supporting or opening up cybersecurity options to really have a sustainable infrastructure in place where we can build this on. We can then securely connect physical objects with their digital twins, and this will allow us to have a first and last mile security for data or trusted data sources that we can compute against. We can also, by using blockchain technology, guarantee object provenance and supervise supply chains. We can automatically settle using crypto wallets. And of course, we can limit access to entitled personnel or people after KYC checks. Last year, basically exactly a year ago, we published a study together with Porsche's consulting daughter company, MHP, where we looked at the automotive sector. And today I spent a few hours looking at the use cases that we were listing back then. And I want to give you a quick overview of where we are or where we have gone in the last 12 months before we listen to Peter, Matthias, and Bruce. So if you want, it's an update about the blockchain mobility landscape from the mobility sector's perspective. So if we enable the future of mobility, and that was part of last year's study, then of course we can name a number of use cases, and some of them are more challenging or closer to us now, and some are more in the future. And then of course they have different degrees of technical and organizational complexity. And looking at it like this, we can group them into something like low-hanging fruit. And I think we will hear some examples of that. And then there are the high potential use cases, but they are more like a marathon. And maybe that's one reason why oftentimes we hear, oh, blockchain adoption is not really kicking in, because some of these projects are really complex and it just needs a bit of time, meaning 1, 2, 3 years before they are really launched. And especially if we think about the future, where we have autonomous vehicles and highly interoperable infrastructures, then we need tamper-proof components and blockchain technology in order to make all of this happen. And if all of these, different layers of value that blockchain technology can add, then we will really see significant values being added to businesses or business models that have been separated so far. So last year we've listed a number of use cases or use case areas. Of course, it's not necessarily the full list. And as I said, we are focusing a little bit on the intersection of physical and the digital area here. But let me just give you some examples where we are. In logistics and supply chain, and this, I think, has been accelerated by Corona. Of course, there are many initiatives. And the good thing is, and that's why I've chosen that example here, BMW announcing their part-chain initiative earlier this year in March and April. Consortial structures are being built up. So as one result of various MVP projects, processes have been tested, and now they are slowly but surely rolled out to vendors in the space. The digital twin as a tool that, of course, is not an invention of blockchain, the blockchain's community, but we know it for a long time in areas like construction, is also pushed. And we see important vendors such as Ricardo, for example, joining the Digital Twin Consortium, where the use of digital twin in the mobility sector is talked about and standardized, hopefully, in the future. Secure access is a topic, and IOTA is one of the protocols or players that is very actively pushing access not only to vehicles but also to buildings by releasing their access control system a couple of months ago, and various partners are joining this initiative, including also Riddle and Code, and JLR is just one example of the automotive industry that is interested in this. And of course, again, looking at the autonomous vehicle future, it becomes quite evident that a backend, typically in a couple of years, then a blockchain-powered backend, will have to decide whether a robotaxi opens up its door and lets passengers in, and then finally if the engine is ignited. KYC is of course also needed for passengers, for drivers, and in order to smoothen the usability of blockchain services. That's certainly a topic for Matthias, and I'm sure he will talk about that in a couple of seconds. Here's just one example how kind of swiping your face or iris scans are used to streamline KYC. And that also underlines why blockchain technology is quite important for our society's futures, because blockchain technology is maybe one of the very few technology tools that can really help us to stay GDPR compliant and to respect data privacy if critical personal data are stored. Then, of course, payments are also a very important field. We've all read the news last week when PayPal announced to also allow, crypto in their ecosystem. But we can see mainly in Asia that automakers are also trialing and planning to use blockchain to enable in-car payments or machine-to-machine payments. Talking about incentivization and gamification, we all know that tokens can be a tool to gamify, and that's especially something that we need to apply if we want to push, behavior that is desired by society, be it for the reduction of CO2 emissions, or to really adopt multimodal transport systems. And recent press releases also talk about the importance of gamification. Then cybersecurity or vehicle-to-X communication, as we can group it. Cybersecurity is quite important because if we have a trusted crypto chip inside a vehicle or inside traffic infrastructure, then of course it becomes much more secure to work with them, to exchange data, and that's an important underlying condition for future cybersecurity measures. The United Nations UNEC body has just released new regulation this summer that all OEMs will have to be able to prove to regulators and other bodies the type of software and firmware that is on their vehicles at any given time. So this kind of immutable registry and data privacy case is a perfect example for a blockchain use case, and I'm pretty sure we will see solutions there. Then, of course, pay-per-use or pay-per-drive insurances are coming up. We all know that telematics insurances are already in place, but typically relying on insecure technologies such as SIM cards and telematics units. And that's also an area where blockchain is providing a layer to upgrade technology. Of course, EV charging and blockchain to settle, these kind of roaming invoice procedures between different EV charging operators. That's also an area for blockchain, but also it helps energy companies to work on the energy reserves and the grid balance in the future. Decentralized mobility services and data places, that's for sure, data marketplaces, that's for sure something that Bruce will elaborate on, and we see various players that are active in the field. And just before we hand over to the different panelists, let me show you one example of our product portfolio. We recently launched a second generation of a retrofit car wallet in the form factor of an OBD dongle together with Daimler Mobility. Let me run a quick video to give you one example how these underlying pieces of blockchain technology are now coming into the equation and how mobility services can build on top of it. A form factor such as a crypto hardware wallet is an essential building block to turn cars, not turning cars into autonomous economic agents. So here's the video, and in advance, thank you for listening.
The mobility sector is going through a fundamental transformation. Cars have become mobile hubs of data, generating and processing unforeseeable amounts of information. However, traditional infrastructure that underpins these systems is centralized and limited in communicating with third-party frameworks. The future of mobility is decentralized and requires different approaches and technologies. Foremost, it requires trust. Riddle & Code partnered with Daimler Mobility to develop the first industry-grade car wallet designed for the new era of mobility.
With the mobility blockchain platform, we're enabling full automation of a vehicle's financial and working lifecycle. We have partnered with Riddle & Code to provide the necessary hardware, to provide each vehicle with a unique identity. This turns the vehicle into a fully autonomous economic agent.
While a vehicle is in motion, Riddle & Code Wallet captures and reads relevant sensor data, attests the data on the immutable blockchain, and performs value transactions and settlements. Riddle & Code doesn't stop here. The next edition of the car wallet comes with plug-and-play OBD connector and supports retrofit installation in vehicles.
That's the small part of our system. It's an OBD2 dongle. We use it to read and track and trace all the canvas data running through the car. But the true powerhouse of this car is in the back. It's an Intel-based server for trusted and confidential computing. By accident, it's exactly the same hardware used for the financial industry in Switzerland. So that's the interesting point. You turn the car into a computer, but you truly turn it into a wallet for settlement and for new kind of business development.
Based on the open source approach principles, the set of new functionalities enables support of decentralized identifiers, trusted data attestation on DLT, and built-in connectivity for local wireless connection, such as 4G. The new car wallet enhances the existing cryptographic hardware with the Apollo system, enabling more secure operations and building a platform where new token-based business models are possible. With Riddle & Code Car Wallet, the vehicle itself turns into a wallet, connecting data, humans, and machines.
So I hope the video quality was acceptable for everybody. And the last sentence is that a car wallet enables trust is the perfect handover to invite Peter Busch from Bosch to talk about trust as one of the key concepts in the Internet of Things. And as we heard before, the Internet of Things, of course, includes the mobility sector. Peter can for sure tell us exciting stories about the past years of Bosch's engagement in that sector. Peter, over to you.
Sebastian, thank you very much. I'm just gonna share my screen then directly. Okay. Okay, yeah, thank you for having me here and talk a little bit about our ideas and our activities here in the mobility space regarding to distributed ledger technologies. In every conference and every panel, I say I do not like the word blockchain here, but okay, but this is more popular. So distributed ledger technology is the thing I'm talking about here. When we talk about DLT, we have to to see what is one of the most important approaches and most important things, and Sebastian already talked about it, is trust. And that's what I'm talking about as a key concept in the Internet of Things. In the introduction, you already have heard I'm working in Bosch for technical strategy, and especially in a huge project of Bosch dealing with these DLT approaches and use cases in all of our industries, in all our branches, and especially when it comes to the Internet of Things. So when we now talk about Bosch for a few seconds, the numbers are quite impressive. But however, what I would like to show here is the shift that is taking place, because we have, of course, major numbers, of course, still in automotive industry, but the other parts, energy, building, technology, and consumer goods, are growing and steadily growing. So this is underlines the need for the complete overview of the Internet of Things of the future. So when we look at the Internet of Things, how we see it is that every domain gets connected, that every device which gets an IP address or any other connectivity creates massive data, and there, of course, you will get new business models and new opportunities to build upon. But on the other side, when we talk about blockchain or distributed ledger technologies, we have quite few new interesting topics which come together to the IoT visions here. And especially when it comes to the digital paying possibilities, decentralization, trust, and most importantly, machine-to-machine value exchange. And that brings us then to the economy of things. And that's how our project is as well named at Bosch, because when you talk about every device will get connected, then of course this device will not only exchange data, they will exchange values and make business with each other. That means we come to more and more to autonomous and legal entities, which has some very interesting consequences for the future. Again, the underlying part in the top part here as well is maybe an alternative approach to centralized platform monopolies. And I think you all know what we mean here. We would like to have a little bit an alternative approach in the future of not having all our data in the future in one central place. And that's definitely where blockchain is coming in place, because we have here the basic parts of decentralization, immutability of the data, tamper-proof and hacker-proof, and as well on the other side, trustless exchange. And so we looked at our project on different use case areas already, because what we need really here is to have an approach on all these different areas where we can look at when we talk about DLT and blockchain. So I said digital currency, and Sebastian already talked about that the EU wallet is one of the very interesting issues and topics that we look at in the car, that you can pay, that you can get paid, and interesting new business models are possible here. But I think the next steps are even more interesting, because the car and any device can act as a digital notary, or needs to have a digital identity to sign in, to consume services wherever it needs to. And that said, we look definitely as well at the possibilities of doing the brokerage stuff here with smart contracts, with intelligence or smart agents on the car. And on the other side, okay, when we come then to these economic devices, maybe some kind of an energy trading or other interesting business models are possible. All that together brings us again to this economy of things. However, what we really have to have a look at is the trust issue. And this is a very huge thing for us. So the internet as we see today doesn't have this trust infrastructure today. So what we need here is another layer of trust, which we can work on in the future if we develop these new business models and these new products here. So we will have, of course, we will have decentralized marketplaces still, but as well, we will have some kind of a decentralized marketplace. And therefore, we need some common trust infrastructure. And at the moment, the most important or most interesting, I would say, area, what we are looking at is these decentralized public key infrastructures. And maybe these standards and these new interesting topics which come up and are quite far already in standardization on the World Wide Web Consortium, for example, these emerging standards, for example, SSI or decentralized identifiers. And this is really one huge thing we think for the future. And let me talk now about the use case, what we implemented in the first place here. This idea, what we had is, what happens if a car doesn't have to get registered on any central platform if you want to consume these services, as I said in the beginning. So we have here an example of parking, and we call it seamless parking because we implemented an SSI approach on the car and as well on the infrastructure. So we have a typical vehicle to infrastructure use case here. So the car is able to find and use parking spots which are normally not findable or not discoverable. So this is a very interesting thing is when we have infrastructure in the future which allows us to find that stuff, this would make really a nice, very new opportunities for us and for every end user. So how does this work? We have here some kind of a SSI infrastructure in the car and as well in the infrastructure. So the car drives around in the city, looks for parking space, and we are working on a decentralized directory where the car is finding or getting offers of parking space which you would normally not expect. And this is very interesting here. And that's what sometimes we call it deep parking, because we work together with some of the big building companies in Berlin. We had this use case here in Berlin, and finding now new parking places which are connected to this infrastructure and making an offer. Hey, I'm a parking spot here and you can park on me. And normally you wouldn't find them. And the good thing about that is it's already working in this case, of course, and you do not have to be registered. And all the payment and digital stuff is possible trustedly about this infrastructure that we have implemented here. So we drive by, get this offer, drive into the house and get directly seamless access. And so you can imagine this is not only just parking, which is possible here. This is more and more getting in all the other services. So you can charge there as well. So e-mobility use case will be possible here. You can think about any use case in the future, what you can think of. So this is only the first thing we are talking about or we are working on. What we are one of the most important next step will be definitely putting SSI as well somehow in the dark data market places. I think we hear a little more about from Bruce later. So here, what is very important for us, and as well using in some kind of an SSI infrastructure, if you have all these nice new interesting features that we can get into the car, and I'm talking about software or firmware over the air, and all these use cases, of course, need a lot of trust, need a lot of security measures, and at the end, of course, safety. And that's what's most important for Bosch, because when we come out with products on the road, the most important thing is safety, that the car is driving safely on the roads. So having some kind of a setup, again, we are talking about SSI on the car, SSI in the infrastructure, SSI somewhere on the roads and in the buildings. And of course, this will be a while, far away to go there. And I think one very important thing, an approach that Sebastian already talked about, is the thing with the open source stuff. So we won't manage it alone. So we have to work together with industry, with all the OEMs out there, with all the industry partners, with all the other companies which are out there, and of course with the governments. Because when we talk about SSI trust infrastructures, I think for them to get working or get them working, we need a co-opetition and a co-working space for all of them together. Okay, I think I'm already done with that. Oops, no, that's what was.
On average, a person spends more than 1,000 minutes every year in
That
their car
was
just
not
searching for equated parts. This wasted time leads to increased traffic.
I'm done. Sorry, it was wrong.
Thanks for that, Peter. Great overview. I think you made it clear to us why trust is a key component. And let's quickly move on to catch up some time to Matthias. And he will talk about mobility as a service and how Deutsche Bahn is implementing it or planning it to implement it in the future. I'm not sure where you are, Matthias, if you're already deployed or if you are still in the planning phase. So stage is yours.
Thanks a lot. So before I start, I was like, or was invited, I was thinking about what presenting today. So we have three big topics at Deutsche Bahn we're currently working on. One is this part of self-sovereign identity. I'm sure that the other participant will catch up with this. So just mentioned additionally to my former speakers that we are also focusing on this SSI in the use case of people a lot. So our passengers, our employees, and so on. And secondly, we're working on a decentralized traffic control for our rail networks. We're working on a lot. But I thought this third case is one of the most interesting one as well for this audience. If you have questions to the other cases, just contact me in the end. And yeah, when I started is like a thing which we all know back in the pre-corona times. We want to go to vacation, want to travel a lot, and hopefully we can do it in 2021 again. And we are currently working on is like the questions like how to get from A to B. How is the process currently going? How can we make this process even more easy than today? And today's problems is pretty obvious. When I want to go from A to B without a car because it's too far away, there's an ocean between it, or I just want to use it, I just want to use sustainable public transport measurements, I have the same problem. When I take the train to this place in Manorolo, as an example, in Italy, I have many different train operators, different booking portals. I have to have different tickets to use. The same if I fly, the same as if I take a traveling bus. And for us, looking at the purpose of mobility as a service is a real pain in the ass. I would like to use this word. That we have all this ticket stuff and handling tax. It's not convenient for the customer. If there's a delay, for example, you're traveling with the train to the airport. It's okay. Taking the train to the airport and a tree falls on the train on the tracks. You have the problem that you can't reach your plane. You have to call the airline and say, okay, I can't reach my airplane right in time. What should I do now? So the passenger itself is stressed. He has to make sure that every connection in his travel he booked separately has to fit in, and that he can use every interaction with every touch point on this travel. And what we want to assure is like building up a concept called mobility service, where you can have a seamless usage customer journey of the whole travel. So it starts with the booking process, having one ticket for the whole trip, having it booked where you want to book it, and can use send and spread every information to this whole booking process needed. So if you, for example, decide to want to book your process through Deutsche Bahn instead of the Lufthansa or TUI or whatever, but you want to fly and have this one ticket for everything, you, for example, want to give the information needed to the different service providers along the road, but not to everybody. So we have to figure out a concept where we can use one ticket for everything and one identity for everything, but not sharing every information along the road to every party here regarding the terms of privacy and data privacy. And when you have a look at the short-range transit in Germany, for example, I look at the public transport network in Berlin-Brandenburg as an example here. You have one ticket and you can drive the whole public network along, which consists of 42 companies. If you look in the Frankfurt area, the Rhein-Main-Verbund also have 160 different companies in it, but you can use one ticket, and just the price is varying depending on the traveling distance you have. If you're, for example, going from Berlin to Brandenburg an der Havel, it's more expensive than you're just moving within Berlin. But you have one ticket already. There are, in Berlin's case, 42 different transport companies you're using. And so they seem to have a solution. How does it work? How does it, is this a solution we can adapt in the long distance transport, even when we are using different transport modes? There was already questions we have to come up here. And then we made a deep dive into these challenges, and the current challenges here, which are all the same challenges on the long distance area, is like one of the part is the time for the clearing process. So if you're looking at the public transportation networks in Germany, there's some networks, there are like 99 networks in Germany all across. And there are like some networks where the clearing process, so who gets the numbers of the tickets and the revenue from the tickets, can take up to 5 years. So in this year, 2020, I know what I earned back in 2014. This is the thing which is unacceptable even on a short distance travel, but also in a long distance way. The ticket combination is very complex. So currently, you have this one ticket to travel this long with the short distance travel part. But if you want to combine it, for example, with a ticket for the swimming pool thing in your city, or with the theater or so on, that doesn't work, because this ticket combination process for this public transportation network is too great and too complex currently. And also, speaking of digitalization of ticketing, the revenue splitting based on the real use currently is nearly impossible, because every data currently coming in the public transportation networks is stored locally, and it's not dynamical, it's statical. Most of those public transportation networks are using Excel or Access databases currently to make up their whole revenue splitting process. And if you want to scale it on a long distance travel network, even this is a challenge one has to overcome with. And the current thing what we try to do is to go into this public transportation network and to pilot on different networks a solution where we want to use blockchain technology first for the revenue splitting part, to say, okay, we want to have this all part like gathering the data still, and the public transportation companies, they still should gather all data they need and how they're doing it today. But we want to have this whole revenue splitting process, the data analysis, the primarily billing, and so on, and even the clearing in the end, not only focused at one party, which is currently the public transportation network, but have it decentralized between all companies in this public transportation network, to approve and achieve maximum of transparency using transparent smart contracts and so on. And having an audible process here where you can automate every revenue splitting process, and also getting the baseline for a mobility as a service ecosystem. When we achieve a fair and square revenue splitting between all parties of a travel connection and travel chain, which is trusted by all parties, we can ensure that we now can put the ticket information we need on a ledger, the same ledger that the revenue splitting is based on, and say, okay, now we have an independent network between all travel parties, which can be used to validate tickets. And this is a baseline where we want to go and to say, okay, this is an opening for building up an open mobility platform. So having a platform where every company can be assured that the revenues coming in is split fair, square, and transparent for these companies. And that's the thing we want to achieve with the blockchain. One guy asked me about the status. So we are, as I said, testing the software. We are currently developing here with different public transportation networks in Germany. And yeah, we are very excited to see what's coming out. And again, as I said, our vision is building an open mobility service platform with seamlessly traveling and one ticket for everything. And therefore, this revenue splitting is one of the key elements which we are currently working on. Having it neutral, having it open is also a second thing we're working on and to come here. That means, on the one hand, the technology must be open. That's why we also put blockchain here into context to say this is a neutral ledger. So there's no major data owner between every mobility provider or facility provider. And also we need an open and cross-industry governance model. So even if we are Deutsche Bahn currently starting this project, we can't be the only one owning this platform. We have to be in an open consortia. And it's a thing we want to establish. We started this project last year. We want to do a market test right now to test this whole system and to establish a baseline for this open governance structure in 2020. Then Corona hits us really hard, even Deutsche Bahn and the rest of the mobility companies. So we are currently postponing everything which you see here to 2021, and hopefully then also this Corona situation will be much more handlebar, so that we can proceed to build up this mobility as a service platform. And as we see from Sebastian's matrix before, this is one of the things he said it was most futuristic and a heavy burden to build this kind of systems. And that's why we as Deutsche Bahn says, okay, blockchain is needed, in our opinion, to have a neutral platform, and we don't want and we can't do it alone. So that's why we want to start to ensure if such construct can work with the market tests, and then go over in some sort of consortia, which is open for everyone in the mobility sector to set up some sort of kind of open mobility platform. And yeah, that's everything for me. Thanks a lot. And I think I hand over to you, Sebastian, again.
Thanks a lot, Matthias. And since Deutsche Bahn is experienced, at least as an organization with almost 200 years of history, with different pandemics, I'm sure you will make it into 2021, and keep my fingers crossed that your blockchain projects work out as planned. That being said, let's switch to Bruce and talk about decentralized data marketplaces or data handling in the mobility sector. Bruce, I think you had an interesting project with Daimler this year, but for sure that's not your only activity. So over to Berlin. You're the only speaker or panelist from Berlin today. So a true virgin, you know.
Sure. Excellent. Hopefully the quality is still good. You can hear me all good? Good. Excellent. So thank you, everybody, for the invitation to speak here. I'm excited to speak here with the Berchain Group. This topic is quite familiar to me. I worked over a decade in the automotive industry, and since then, I've reflected a lot on the mobility sector. With Ocean Protocol, we have worked to allow people to buy and share data securely while protecting privacy. And our goal is that Ocean becomes the connective tissue for the data economy. We see a world where data is an asset that is accessible to everybody, and where people can share their data and receive compensation. So our main topic today is mobility, and this is a business vertical that fits perfectly with Ocean Protocol. Besides Daimler, the use case I'll speak about today, we worked with MOBI, the Mobility Open Blockchain Initiative, a global consortium backed by forward-thinking vehicle manufacturers such as GM, Renault, and Ford to facilitate the use of blockchain technology for a safer, greener, and more accessible mobility. We designed a data exchange marketplace for Dex Freight, a trucking and logistics provider in the US that lets logistics companies aggregate and monetize operational data. We've also had other projects with automotive companies that are under NDA still. And we started working with automotive companies today, and today this is still one of the most active industries for us. And why is that? The industry is very active and interested in new technologies that enable data sharing. Data is being generated in ever greater amounts by vehicles. They're becoming sensing machines for the external environment, as well as collecting data internally on passengers and drivers. And whether it's intelligent routing for traffic, autonomous cars, or managing parking, as was mentioned earlier, they all need data to run. And that data is out there. It's sitting in a silo in someone's data center unused. And this rich trove of data is underutilized. There's a host of use cases that are only now being explored. Car makers and suppliers are pivoting away from internal combustion engines. Startups and internet giants are looking to disrupt the mobility sector, and automakers Cities want to improve citizen quality of life while promoting sustainable business, and insurers need to underwrite risk in a world where mobility is managed by AI. And data sharing is going to happen one way or the other. The question is how. Do we use the existing legacy models of data sharing where large incumbents make deals amongst themselves, or will it be an open system of data sharing that gives a level and fair playing field for everyone? Existing legacy models are tedious. They take a long time for agreements to be struck and are intransparent for most people. An open system sets out clear standards for data sharing that anyone can agree to while reducing friction for data sharing to happen. And I think it's clear where I stand. I think an open system is where we need to go. It's self-evidently better for everyone because more data can be shared faster. We can roll out innovations across the entire spectrum of use cases faster. And the opportunity is huge. McKinsey estimated that car data is worth 400 to 750 billion by 2030. It's only a decade away. And if this target is hit, it means that a completely new set of Apple, Amazon, Google, and Facebook will, in the next decade, will be created just for car data. And in this car data sharing future, will it be existing car incumbents, high-tech platforms, or upstart startups that come onto the scene? And in this context, we finalized this year a proof of concept for Daimler AG in collaboration with Daimler Southeast Asia in Singapore. Daimler is on the journey to being a data-driven company, and with this collaboration, we enabled them to build a secure enterprise B2B data marketplace to monetize and put data at work. It's an opportunity for them to aggregate data with a clear compensation approach internally, and this was possible to implement, of course, in a secure and transparent way, thanks to the ocean technology, even for their internal use cases. And the focus of the collaboration was to explore decentralized data orchestration, moving data around, processing in different ways, involving all the components of Ocean Protocol with an end-to-end solution using the blockchain proof of authority network that we had at the time, the access control, data discovery, decentralized storage, and compute to data. So we used the full stack top to bottom. And we hope to see more projects like this one in the automotive sector. But first, we need to answer a crucial question. And that is, why isn't data being shared freely today? And what are the main challenges? Most obviously, there's no overwhelming financial incentive to share data that exceeds the current friction and barriers. Everyone knows that they can make money if they share, but something's missing or blocking. And the three main points that I've kind of identified is pricing. There is no price signal on data. It's an illiquid market, and there's a lack of data sales, which begets a further lack of data sales. So this lack of a pricing signal is huge, because if people don't know what the data is worth, they're not really incentivized to unlock it. When there is pricing, or if there is pricing, there's also a question of trust. What's the data being used for? Do I give up privacy? Am I giving up company secrets? And this trust entails a bunch of aspects related to custody, access, and usage from the provider, and things like data quality and provenance of the data for the consumer. And assuming that finally the first two problems of pricing and trust are solved, then the third barrier is process. How do I actually discover, negotiate use, work with the data? And that has, up until now, been very, very difficult to audit. So that, in a nutshell, is the three reasons why data isn't being shared: the pricing signals, the lack of trust, and a process that allows for the data to properly being shared. We worked intensely for the last 3 years to address these challenges around pricing, trust, and the process, and it all has come together with Ocean V3, which we launched yesterday. Ocean V3 is the piece that we think helps to unlock a data economy across all industries and verticals, with data tokens, an ocean marketplace, and initial data offerings as the key elements. The core component of Ocean v3 is the data token, where data tokens are ERC20 tokens that represent both the value of the data asset and provide access control to the data access. And that data token is the heart of v3. It's a radically simpler user interaction for data sharing. It leverages the Web3 mental models and for liquidity, custody, wallet staking, and farming. And we think that that is going to be the core for data sharing in the future. We built an open ocean market on top of that infrastructure, which is just a marketplace, a front end. Anybody can copy it, take it, fork it, and create their own marketplace for industry verticals, a specific type of data sets, all that sort of stuff. It's built on decentralized blockchain technology, but the code base is open, so anybody can take it, where data owners can publish data and receive a set of minted data tokens, which then can be sold to the people who want to take it. The consumers get the data tokens and then they access the data. And the pricing is really innovative here because we use automatic price discovery tools with a pioneering approach of decentralized exchange technology that is directly integrated into the ocean market. On top of that, we have discovery tools, etc. We have the compute to data feature, which allows the publishers to sell the private data while preserving the privacy, and it avoids data escape. So the ocean market kind of is the culmination of the front end. However, that front end can be copied, used by anybody who wants to start selling data. That's our kind of contribution to the community as well. And with initial data offerings, the publishing of the data set is essentially a tokenized version of that data asset. It's represented, and you can input that into any automated market maker, liquidity pool, such as on Balancer, on Uniswap, on Kyber, and people can start trading it. In fact, one of the very first examples is Amazon data. It's not car data, but it's Amazon data, where the price when it was published was $1,000. It's now $13,000. And the amount of liquidity that has gone behind that piece of data has grown to about $750,000 in less than 24 hours. So it's an interesting experiment. Buyer beware. We ask all users to be very cognizant and cautious. But I mean, the fact that we already have one data set with $750,000 of liquidity behind it and kind of a price signal, that's great. We hope for more of that. And in closing, Ocean v3 can be successfully applied to the mobility sector. We hope that there's a ton of autonomous car data, there's passenger data, whatever type of data that any mobility provider, whether it's a transport company like Deutsche Bahn or automaker like Mercedes, or even a charging station or parking, a city, can start putting in this data and let that data be monetized and tokenized so they can understand truly the value of the data, because this is really powerful stuff. We're putting the tools of finance on top of monetizing data, and we're giving also the tools to control privacy or give people the comfort of privacy while controlling their data. And with that, I will hand it back over to Sebastian.
Thanks a lot, Bruce. And you win the prize for the most stylish headphones today. And also thanks to introduce a new acronym, the IDO. But it sounds quite promising, what you achieved so far. So thanks for all the presentations, very interesting projects we heard about. And let's now jump into the panel discussion. And my first question maybe is to you, Bruce. You're still in the mood of speaking. How do you perceive, interoperability in the blockchain space? Because I'm pretty sure, looking at Peter's and Matthias's slides, most complex blockchain projects will involve more than just one chain. You're the most experienced veteran from us here. Where do you see this trend going?
So I think within the blockchain space, the interoperability is pretty much, the building blocks are there. We are now going to be able to use building blocks for NFTs, for personal tokens, for data, built off of the DeFi innovations as well as the Ethereum innovations. We have layer 1 technologies that are now coming out, which are EVM compatible, so that any Ethereum smart contract can run on them. So within the blockchain space, innovation is going to run 10x faster, maybe even 100x faster than, for instance, in a larger enterprise. And the interface point to a larger enterprise is always, I'm guessing everybody here understands that, whether you're with Bosch, IBM, Deutsche Bahn, or Riddle and Code, you understand that that interface point is going to be the hardest point, because then you're touching the real world of $300 million of IT systems and a lot of different APIs, service-oriented architectures and stuff that you need to just kind of wrangle to make this work.
How has it worked for you, Peter and Matthias? We all know that typically big corporations with a long history are struggling to adopt new technologies. You both had, quite sizable teams that were doing, analysis, research. You talked to a lot of companies. What's your answer towards not only interoperability, but to get internal support for your plans?
If I might start for that part, yeah, our infrastructure, or our structure of the projects. We do not have that big problem to have internal support, because we have a strategic project which spans over all the branches and all the business units of Bosch, and we get funded quite nicely from them because they expect us to come up with interesting results. However, when we look in the industry, and it's nothing more true than that blockchain is not built by one company, and it's not built by one industry, maybe as well, for example. So we are really struggling still with getting the best support from all the other companies, because when I talk about the classic industry, and when I talk about startups who are really normally are used to work in another mode, the classic industry is just slow and thinking not really in this digitalization aspects that we would like to have them. So I think there we have to do much more of a convincing strategy, and maybe I have some hope in the new GaiaX strategies or GaiaX activities which are coming up, because this gets the industry and all the companies better together.
Is this more European perspective to focus maybe a bit on projects or collaborations such as GaiaX, because the cloud space is, I don't know, 5 to 10 years longer or more down the road?
Yeah, definitely. GaiaX is here, the European aspect, of course, and later on we have to think about the international space here. However, the current political situation allows us, or we have the pressure here to think in more of a European way, I'm afraid. And then we can, hopefully, time will tell, we can think a lot more internationally again in the future.
Matthias, maybe a subset of that question to you. Listening to yesterday's IoT section of the Blockchain in Use conference, I think it was Carsten from Spherity complaining that the state subsidy programs that the German Ministry of Economics is having out there for secure digital identities is somehow killing the market for startups, because even the big companies are focusing on these initiatives. And Peter, what you said about GaiaX is a bit going in the same direction. I think it's normal in an economic downturn. But how do you perceive the situation, Matthias? Are these standardization activities, regardless of them being happening in a consortial way, such as with GaiaX, or whether it's a subsidy program, are these absolutely necessary, or is there still an appetite to try to be a first mover by funding projects or co-funding projects and develop them with startups?
So on the one hand, so looking at the railway sector in Germany, the entry barriers for IoT solutions, for example, here are extremely high. So we have very, very high admission hurdles. The devices has to go checks from the Ministry of Train Ministry, the Eisenbahnbundesamt, getting approvals, which is not that hard like in the airline industry, but one of these approval parts can take up to 5 years, cost several millions of euros just to get this device approved you can then use into your trains. And this is a very high hurdle, especially for startups who just not have that much money to say, okay, I can save nothing. I should spend like 5 years getting no results. It's just the admission hurdle I have to pass, and then I can start selling my products. And this is very, very heavy, which makes slows down many things here. And this is why I think that the future, even here, will be setting consortia between the big companies, between the politics, like the ministries, and also the big companies, to work on several projects where we together try to solve this problem of the admission hurdles and to focus on the integration of parts. For example, like you mentioned, Carsten from Sverity, we have a research project ongoing with them, with Sverity, where we try to digitalize the train black box. And therefore, this is also a thing where we have huge hurdles within Europe, not only Germany, on the legal part. And so we have big consortia there. We're also working together with Siemens for the TÜV, with the Hasselplattner Institute, just in order to challenge the hurdles. But even for us as Deutsche Bahn, it's pretty hard to face the hurdles alone. So the future, I would say, in all cases, is working consortia.
Then we'll meet somewhere at the European frontier. We are doing, I think, quite a similar thing for a European railway company. Bruce, is this kind of the, you know, the red line between, you know, projects that are more data centric, where you don't have the same kind of, you know, legacy infrastructure and legacy regulation coming into place? Is this a reason why you are bullish on data marketplaces and you know, the Ocean Protocol?
Yeah, I think that we definitely have some advantages within Europe. For instance, GDPR writes into stone the personal right to their data, and we can work with that. Blockchain technology is perfect for that, actually. At the initial phases, people were quite scared of using blockchain because it's a permanent record of transactions. But if you use it for that, for transactions and smart contracts, you don't have to get into storing people's data. And that data can be stored on Filecoin, on Arweave, on other servers where the person fully controls their kind of data, but make it accessible using the controls, the access controls, and the smart contracts of blockchain. And so we think that that is something that is fantastic, the GDPR, because it sets the way for the world, not just Europe, for data sharing. And I think that for most of the larger enterprises, like the Daimlers and the Volkswagens and the large industries, data is not an asset that is on the balance sheet. And so if we can find ways to put money and value on that, then it's a completely new greenfield. And of course, it has to go through legal compliance and all that sort of stuff. But the fact that there's value that can be generated and everybody understands that, and we as an industry group can help them with that, then we will be kind of central in their becoming a data-driven company. All of us will be able to help with that.
I guess the Google role model helps with regards to that business model approach. Quick question to all of you, and whoever comes first may give an answer. Talking about cybersecurity and regulation, looking at one of the neighboring industries, the energy industry, right now, at least in Germany, we have a plan that is currently rolled out by the ministry and by DENA, the German Energy Agency, which is quite logical. Right now, a project is ongoing where a registry for energy producing assets is built, you know, machine identity, central registry. The next project will be about, you know, smart contracts. How can we ensure that the governance and, you know, monitoring and managing these assets is going in the right direction? Because, you know, there are requirements, energy reserves, grid balancing, et cetera, et cetera. Do you miss a comparable framework that also has the clear support of the government for the mobility sector, or is it just, you know, more cluttered between the different infrastructures, railway infrastructure here, Autobahn highways there, and we've seen that fight in the political arena for decades now. Because I think what the energy sector does here is quite logical and makes a lot of sense to build up or to enable the infrastructure layer.
When I look for the automotive industry, it's quite the opposite. I think we have some quite new consortia or working groups and stuff coming up, trying to regulate or trying to design for example, the automotive data marketplaces here as well, and get to maybe some input for the governments to get to a regulation later on. And we had lots of work done in the government in interest groups as well. So putting the blockchain expressions there and some kind of the inputs here, but not really at the end, a lot of came out yet. So it's true, mobility and in automotive and so we have to go a long way here still. However, the interest is increasing. A lot of things happening at the moment, maybe as well in the preparation for these so-called Gaia X activities. But on the other side, there is something called Datenraummobilität, talking about data spaces. We have the International Data Space Association. We have automotive associations and all that stuff coming up. And I think these are going in this direction because I heard lots of ideas coming from the government telling us get in the driver's seat here and do something when it comes to the new technologies, when it comes to what is the role of data, who owns the data, what kind of decentralization approaches are there. So quite interested what's happening. But as I said in the beginning, it's quite slow.
I think, Matthias, that the railway system is even more heavily regulated. And in the Q&A section, there's a question to Bruce that I can also forward to you. Because the answer hopefully plays in our direction. How can you assure that the data offered by data producers has not been tampered with? So how do you ensure data integrity? And I think given your infrastructure, if you want to fully automate it, you need to be sure that this data is not coming from a supervisor that is just playing a mobile game on his cell phone and pressing the wrong button.
Yeah, so you're trying to write out, we're heavily regulated. So if I look at the security requirements, for example, to make let's say an automated switch, which you can switch via internet from a digital traffic control tower. We have to ensure that this switch is switched on the right purpose and that only the traffic control tower can switch the switch and not a hacker or so on. And even here, the manuals and the fallback options and the security options are like it's a paper for 800 pages. The thing was like 800 pages long. How to ensure the device security in this motor of the switch that we can access this via internet and try to control it. So currently this is very, very heavy in the normal security classic standards and how to assure and to assure the IT security behind this part. And we hopefully get the new technology parts as we still discuss this with the ministry, and as I said, it takes a lot of time. So systems which are currently setting into the market are like 5 years old because we have to fulfill all these regulation parts. 5 years ago we started with them. So currently we are classical underway and ongoing, and we hopefully change this in the next years so we can build up faster approaches of the systems using new technology.
We have a question in the chat room about business models, and yes, it's a bit hard to talk about business models because most projects are infrastructure projects and consortial projects where there's not necessarily one price tag that makes it clear to everybody. Bruce, talking about maybe to both you and Peter, if we talk about the data side of things, where it might be easier to model a business case, will it be easier if we include tokenization, or will, which is a kind of a technology or an approach that is directly connected to blockchain tech, or is it easier to find a niche or tackle an area such as the data part of business and use normal currencies? What's your approach? Peter, we all know about your history, or Bosch's history, to invest with your VC arm in IOTA.
You said it again.
I said it again, yeah, and that has been a couple of years ago. So where do we stand? Will, despite all the regulatory aspects that are still not fully clear but are in discussion at a European and national level, will it be easier to use tokens in the future to model, or should this, or is this more complicating things?
It won't get easier, and it will be very, very important to have it, definitely. But it's really a hard process, what we are in front of, what we are seeing here. As I said, we will really need it. We are not really quite sure yet about how it is working, because do we talk about micro tokens? Do we talk about nano tokens or anything like that? Do we only talk about payment of services here? What I'm quite sure is that we come to some kind of a system which regulates all that, which we have then later on, because at the moment we are at the edge of some very, very major decisions coming up. What does that mean for an Internet of Things when autonomous systems need to get connected and talk to each other? And there we need some kind of a token model, definitely, because we do not have the people sitting behind the wheel and pushing the buttons and having their cards ready and all that stuff. So it's coming. However, nobody knows really how this will work in the future. And of course, there are quite interesting models yet, Bruce. Yeah, so we look at these definitely. And however, when we talk about business models here in that context, it's so hard to really make a prediction, because we are at the foundation phase at the moment. And so we talk about this infrastructure, which is absolutely needed. And we talk about business model maybe then in a few years, when we are able to use this infrastructure, which is coming up. And if all the industry partners are working on that as well and are open enough to embrace that, then we can talk about business models. However, now we just talk about the foundation, how about building up the infrastructure.
Bruce, you're closer to today's business models. Do you think tokens are helping?
I think there's two worlds right now. There's two tracks. There is the track, which is let's say the crypto native track, which is using tokens. And then there's the industry track. And the honest fact, and I mentioned this earlier in my presentation, the crypto track is moving at 100x faster than the industry track. And this is good and bad. It's good because the innovation is going to happen a lot faster. The building blocks are getting there very, very quickly with various technologies that we're seeing. It's all composable. It's all interoperable. There are virtually no barriers to adoption within the crypto space, other than the on-ramp of getting your fiat into crypto or getting your systems to talk to MetaMask, these types of things. But the crypto system as an insular group is now reaching a certain amount of liftoff capacity to break through that gravity and build its own systems for non-fungible tokens, data, personal tokens, projects, funding, all that sort of stuff. It's there. And that's a challenge, because for industry sectors, it's really difficult. You have so many different layers where an idea, if it has a business idea, it has to pass through the business group, IT, compliance, legal, audit, regulatory, etc. Any idea that can get through all of those systems will already have been somehow, for lack of a better term, neutered.
Yeah.
In terms of its kind of dynamicism, the ability to be really on the edge of thinking. You're not going to get it through those 7 layers without it getting neutered to some extent. And so that poses a unique challenge for any consultant, any large OEM, Bosch, these types of companies, Deutsche Telekom. You have innovators within these organizations who are working very hard to show the value, and there is immense value. but it'll be very few use cases that we'll actually be able to get through. Tokens are a fundamental piece. Blockchain, smart contracts, there's a whole bunch of these building blocks that are available right now that are being used in the space. But we're hopeful that there's going to be a few that do break through.
For your internal discussions, Matthias, tokenizing non-bankable or non-fungible assets like the big infrastructure you're sitting on, has this caused at least some excitement within Deutsche Bahn, or is everybody looking at the big directories and regulatory books with hundreds of pages and says, oh no, we're not going to touch this one?
No, we want to touch this. We want to go in. We want to go into this part that the train can pay the infrastructure and can maintain themselves. And what we have to take into account here is the complexity of the system. So if you want to ensure that this kind of token payments in the system is going to work, this should not only work with Deutsche Bahn, but all the 350 different train companies in our network. So it has to be compliant for everyone and easy accessible to everyone. And also, we are not the only people owning our network. Our network is connected to the other countries like Austria, like Switzerland, like France. So having the trains coming from Austria or the TGV from France in our network, and these trains also have to pay our infrastructure via tokens, which is, they say this is the only currency we are now accepting because it's easier for us. All those companies using this or having to use the system has to get on this level. And that makes it so much complicated and such a long-term thing to do so. So we're working on in different projects on how to enable the train to sell or to build the infrastructure. There is an open pricing list, how much a kilometer of infrastructure will cost. You can Google it. It's really open for public. Everyone can see how much does it cost to stop a train at Berlin train station, main station. How much will cost a kilometer track in Berlin, where also S-Bahn and so on is driving. How much a kilometer will cost a traffic road where just an ICE can drive, or a train with similar speed. But all this mechanism behind to enable this payment has to be open for every train company in Germany, or at least in Europe when they are using our network. So.
Okay, that's interoperability squared compared to inter-chain compatibility. Maybe last question to all of you guys, and please don't push your own projects here, but looking at the mobility sector as a whole, and maybe also including neighboring industry sectors, which blockchain project or which adoption of blockchain technology excites you most currently? Is there something where you think, oh, I didn't think about that, 2-3 years ago, and now it's appearing on the horizon?
When I start again, the most interesting parts said in my presentation are really the data models for software over the air, where we have to make sure that data is absolutely safe and sound, which comes into the car, which gets out of the car, and using here some models of digital identity, so to speak, maybe SSI or any comparable one, because these are the major challenges that we face in the future, that we need to control that data which goes out and comes in.
Do you agree that the whole software over the air update registry is an ideal blockchain, situation?
No, definitely not. However, when you look at SSI, for example, you only have blockchain in the background somehow, to be as an initiator for the credentials or something like that. Of course, when it comes to scalability and latency and all that stuff, you need an approach where you have all these challenges solved, and we have to find a way for the digital identities to be there, and to not only have the possibility, the need to access a blockchain for that. That's sure.
Okay, over to you, Bruce and Matthias. Anything exciting that you see in our space?
Sure, I'll go. So I think that what has become clear and most obvious is that this Ethereum infrastructure is essentially a financial infrastructure. This is something that can be applied to anything, and it's something that we didn't really think about. Sure, there was this whole ICO craze for a new way to fund projects and ideas, and we had 1,000 different projects get funded based on that. But now we're applying it to other aspects of the world, whether it's a virtual world, it's art, it's data, etc. And that is one of the missing links that allows us to understand the price and the value of things in a digital world. It's something we never had. It was the missing layer of the internet, and it was so obvious, but it wasn't something that we really realized until we actually had a couple of other tools that came through, like automated market makers, insurance, lending, collateral, all these different protocols that are now allowing us to rebuild the financial system in the crypto space and then apply it to other forms of value that we're never able to monetize before. That was the biggest surprise. Luckily, we figured some parts of it out early enough to build something like Ocean, but I'm really shocked at how fast this has moved and how interoperable things are now, so that we can pretty much, as of 2020, monetize so many more things that weren't possible even just a year ago.
Talking about, or one question back to you, Bruce, about that, because that's more, you know, the blockchain purist community that heads in that direction. Do you see the upcoming regulation of these financial services and solutions as a necessary step to allow the industry to come on board, or do you think this will, you know, slow things down and also destroy some ideas?
I think it'll definitely hinder adoption in certain ways. One of the things that we really feel strongly about is inclusion. Everybody, people who don't carry around their IDs, people who are downtrodden and who don't have access to the current financial system and the financial tools. We want to give power to each individual. And when you have this regime of KYC, when you have a regime of accredited investors, when you have this kind of, we protect you because of this, I understand completely why. But if we're going to allow somebody from Ulaanbaatar or somebody in rural Germany or somebody anywhere to access this financial infrastructure, we can't impose on them, or we shouldn't impose on them, all of these things that are meant for the 0.001%. If we look at all these financial regulations, what were they there for? They were actually for preventing terrorism, fully agree. They're preventing money laundering, fully agree. But I mean, this is more of a purist view, and I'm getting actually more and more, let's say, radical about this. I think that all of these tools, the 99.999% of the people suffer for them in this form, for them trying to stop all of these activities that are noble. But I think there's much better ways for that to be done.
Did you by purpose compare rural Germany to Ulaanbaatar?
I just wanted to pick any geography.
But it fits.
Internet in rural Germany is actually probably as good as Ulaanbaatar.
I guess, you know, when the Mongols had to write back over the steps to elect the new Khan because they didn't have blockchain-based voting systems 800 years ago, world history would have been different if they would have gone through to Berlin. But Matthias, over to you, talking about inclusion, and maybe a last question to you, because, you know, we talk about tech components all the time, we talk about business models all the time, and we all know it will be difficult to get everybody onboarded, but I'm not assuming that Deutsche Bahn is wanting to empower the hobos in the future, but rather to have an inclusive, at least, user experience. How important is usability already? You were showing a few screenshots from your app, but sometimes we have this problem that people want better security. But, you know, better security requires more sophisticated processes, and it's not just a, you know, four-letter PIN. Do you see it there, or are you optimistic that, you know, blockchain can also be a very well-performing technology on the usability level?
Wait a second, I have some sort of traffic delays here in the internet. Do you understand me?
Yes.
Okay, that's good. So as far as I understand, you asked me if customer experience can be matched with blockchain and the technology and IT security part. If I get the
blockchain is more secure. That's why typically, usability is a bit hindered. How do you solve it in the train context?
Yeah, the question is like, who do you want to address with which kind of solution? So if you go for a public solution for example, or passengers or things, for example, for them it's not necessary to know that you use blockchain or what kind of technology you want to use. For them, it's important that they have an application they can use as easy as possible, and that they can trust this application. And I think the normal passenger wouldn't care if this secured by blockchain or by any other crypto things, whatever. I think this is not only the passengers, also the employee who wants to work with the solution. They don't want to take the security things into account. They don't want to care how to deal with the technologies. They just want to have a solution they want to work on. Based on the things like self-sovereign identity, it's kind of a bit different, that even they want to have an easy usability of their identity and everything, stuff like this. But in this case, it's going through the data, the personal stuff. They are more curious, I guess, like in other applications, what's happened with their data. And therefore, one has to find a mix of usability in the area of, hey, everything is free, you can understand everything and click and easy drag and drop anything into a shopping chart and have a one-click buying experience, versus, okay, you now have to enter a PIN to get into the application. You now have to apply that you will share your data node to a company or something else. So you really have to find the right level between IT security and effort and the people have, which is not convenient, and convenience in having a nice user experience. In this case, I would say technology, so if blockchain is used or something else, is less important to the user than just the feeling that the application will secure their information itself. And this is the story behind the application of the technology.
Okay, thank you. And one last answer to a question in the chat that was directed at me about the retrofit car wallet. And it also, is touching usability and security here. Stefan was asking if the car wallet cannot just be, taken out of one car and put into another. And that's exactly the beauty of blockchain. If you can give a tamper-proof identity to an object like a car wallet, and you have a digital twin registered on the chain, you can marry this digital twin and the car wallet and the car using even a standard, vehicle identification number. This means that on the digital twin layer, you can manage the system and you can prevent it from operating another car. In the same way, Deutsche Bahn will have to, secure their, compound or aggregated trains in the future. The different pieces of infrastructure come together, and this kind of aggregation or teaming up of components is registered on the internet, and then you can verify the integrity of that setup, and it can only operate as long as it is not changed or altered. That's exactly what blockchain is good for, to steer complex systems such as mobility. And I'm pretty sure that, Peter Busch, as the black belt sportsman he is, will fight for, not only within Bosch, but also within consortia like Gaia X. We keep our fingers crossed for Matthias, so that Deutsche Bahn goes well into 2021 and beyond. And we wish Bruce and the Ocean Protocol team all the best for the next interesting IDOs. And I think if we come together in 1 year, we will have hopefully more success stories to tell, and also can show the progress of these marathon projects that most of us are currently working on. So thanks a lot, and back to you, Artyona. Any announcements you want to make on behalf of the BirdChain team?
Thank you so much, Sebastian, Bruce, Matthias, and Peter. I can't believe that almost 2 hours are over. approaching the top of the hour. I think that's pretty impressive for an era of Zoom fatigue, and like on a Wednesday afternoon, like we had, I think at 90% of the times, almost like 80 participants. So thank you so much everyone for supporting and attending, and we hope that this was helpful for you. And yeah, all the credits go to our impressive panelists and you, Sebastian. So thank you so much for that, and you all have a good day ahead. Yeah. Bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye, everybody. See you soon.